Next presentation is Team Mare Nostrum. They will talk about the adoption of carbon footprint code in the shipping industry. Please welcome Team Mare Nostrum.
We only have one Earth. We are all in this together. Let's save our Earth. Let's save our sea. Let's save humanity.
우리의 바다.
Our sea.
Mare Nostrum.
Good afternoon. We are Mare Nostrum. Honorable Chairman and respected judges and distinguished delegates. Do you perhaps like Coke? Because I personally love Coke. So let me just take a sip before I start the presentation. Okay, so according to a study done in 2009 by the British carbon footprint calculation firm Carbon Trust, the 330 milliliters of Coke I just drank emits 170 grams of carbon from its production stage up to its consumption. Today, we stand here to present the possible methods that will be needed to connect carbon footprint and the IMO regarding IMO Strategic Direction 3, Respond to Climate Change. Before we begin though, we would like to share some background knowledge. Recently, we've been experiencing drastic climate changes, the likes of which have never been seen before. As you can see in this slide, just by looking at the events that happened this year, you can see that unusual climate changes have negatively impacted many people's lives all over the world. According to the IMO's fourth greenhouse gas study released last year, carbon dioxide emissions in the maritime transport industry have significantly increased in a short 6-year time frame from 961 million tons in 2012 to 1,056 million tons in 2018. This is equivalent to about 2.76 to 2.89% of the world's greenhouse gas emissions. Also, a greenhouse gas emission record was released showing that the international shipping industry produced about 650 million tons of carbon dioxide in 2016. This was the 8th largest carbon emission in the world after China, United States, India, Russia, Japan, Germany, and Canada. The amount of carbon emission obviously varies between the two studies based on the measuring method and criteria. However, we can clearly see the significant difference of carbon emission produced in the shipping industry today. The United Nations have perceived the severity of these climate changes in an earlier stage. And in order to regulate the greenhouse gas emissions by artificial means, the UN adopted the UNFCCC, which is the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. Since then, many nations have been coming together to implement the UNFCCC through the adoption of Kyoto Protocol in 1997 and the Paris Climate Agreement in 2015. On the other hand, the UN's Maritime Specialized Agency, the IMO, adopted the initial IMO strategy on the reduction of greenhouse gas emission from ships to reduce ships' greenhouse gas by at least 40% by 2030 and 50% by 2050, both compared to 2008. So there are about 6 major greenhouse gases stated in the Kyoto Protocol, and IMO's fourth greenhouse gas study shows that amongst these 6, majority of emissions in the shipping industry is carbon dioxide, which totals up to about 98% of all greenhouse gases. So then now we come to pose a question, what is carbon footprint? So carbon footprint is related to the total amount of greenhouse gas emitted. In other words, it is defined as the total amount of carbon released from the beginning of production till the product being consumed or discarded. As a result, carbon footprint can also be the standard for calculating greenhouse gas emissions. So why then does the IMO need to adopt carbon footprint? So the first reason is international recognition. Carbon footprint is a concept that is defined and used by many international organizations. UNFCCC has created and is making use of a carbon footprint calculator based on the carbon footprint definition. ISO has also created a calculation criteria for carbon footprint in 2013, as well as WHO, who established a CF definition in 2008. Additionally, marine-related companies like Lloyd's Register and BP have already implemented the principle of carbon footprint.
As much as the world's international organizations and diverse businesses are utilizing the carbon footprint term, there is a need for the IMO to introduce a common standard for the shipping industry internationally. The second reason is to assist the IMO's greenhouse gas calculation to refine the results. To date, the IMO has performed a total of 4 greenhouse gas studies. From each research, IMO has maintained existing research methods and at the same time incorporated new research methods. You can also see that in this slide. As technology advances and research progresses, the data will become more accurate. In the future greenhouse gas studies that will take place, more accurate results will be obtained from existing research methods along with new methods. If the IMO uses carbon footprint as a standard for greenhouse gas calculation or greenhouse gas emission, it'll be very helpful in accurately obtaining the actual greenhouse gas emission in the shipping industry. Regardless of the wide use of this term, it is not specified who used and when the term was first used. However, a shared perception of what carbon footprint signifies does. Hence, in order to use the term carbon footprint in one field, the meaning and extent needs to be clarified in advance. So, this is what we propose to the IMO. Under the leadership of MEPC, we propose the introduction of carbon footprint code that will be independent and distinctive to MARPOL and its annexes. This should cover everything, from its definition to market-based measures in the long run. The carbon footprint code will consist of the following 4 sections. The first one is definition, and the second will be method of measurement. And the third, we'll talk about CF Levy, and this is our market-based measure. And the last will be the CF board. In the previous section, we emphasized the necessity to regulate the definition and coverage of the term carbon footprint to make use of one criteria. Therefore, there should be an official term of carbon footprint for IMO and the shipping industry. Under the IMO Convention Article 38, the MEPC is responsible for managing and preventing marine pollutions produced by ships. So, the IMO's definition of carbon footprint should focus on the ship itself. With this in mind, we suggest defining carbon footprint in the IMO's own term as the total carbon released from shipbuilding to scrap. We abbreviate it as S2S. There is only a definition of carbon footprint. There is only a definition of a similar stage of ship construction in MARPOL Annex 6, but it doesn't specify the exact moment of the ship construction. Therefore, we propose to define shipbuilding as the moment structural steel is cut for the ship construction. Additionally, there should be an insertion of compulsory regulation to measure the carbon emitted in the early stage of ship construction. However, in the case of existing ships, it is difficult to measure the carbon emitted when constructed. Therefore, we have decided to assume the amount of carbon emission from the construction of existing ships as the construction of newly built ships with similar gross tonnage.
In the operating phase, We must utilize data from the IMO data collection system that has been operating under Marble Convention Annex 6. Member states and shipping companies are reporting the amount of fuel used to the IMO under this system. There's a need to specify ship's operation as neither in shipbuilding nor scrapping phase in the CF code. In the scrapping phase, we like to focus on the Ship Recycling Convention. This convention also defines the ship scrap as ship recycling. However, the definition of scrap should additionally be defined in the CF code as when dismantling has progressed and the ship is no longer functional. Like the shipbuilding phase, there should be an article on how much carbon is emitted during the scrapping phase. Now, let me introduce what CF Levy is. The IMO follows the NMFD principle to cope with environmental issues. However, IMO's NMFD principle contradicts UNFCCC's CBDR principle. As a way to compromise this, we would like to introduce market-based measures in the CF code. When the shipping industry follows the carbon footprint system to obtain the total amount of carbon emissions more accurately, it will be of great help to establish market-based measures. We suggest that the IMO conducts a study on CF Levy and would like to apply in the CF code. CF Levy is a combination of carbon tax and emission trading system, both currently in discussion by the IMO. This requires ship owners to pay a certain cost per tonnage for fossil fuels purchased for ship operation. When the total amount of carbon emission is determined through a carbon footprint system, emission reduction targets should be set by ship types and achievement reviewed should be given in a given time frame. To ships that fail to meet targets by using fuel oil, they should implement the reduction goal by applying additional tax as a punitive taxation method. In order to alleviate the impact of fully implementing the CF Levy, an extremely low tax rate should be measured in the initial few years. Expenses from the CF Levy will be accumulated by the CF Board, and the CF Board will be in charge of supporting and implementing the CF Code in developing countries. CF Levy will comply with the NMFD principle by applying a uniform tax rate and also implement the CBDR principle through the CF Board. Now, the CF Board that I've just mentioned so many times is a necessary organization for the smooth implementation of the CF Code. The board will have two main roles. The first role is to support least developing countries and small island developing states. The CF Board is in charge of distributing the accumulated fund from the CF Levy. The CF Board will provide infrastructure and support to these nations so that they don't face any difficulties in implementing the CF Code. This will also correspond with the guiding principle of IMO's initial strategy. The second role is to amend the CF Code after entry into force. If the CF Code is adopted in the future, it should aim to allow all member states to suggest amendments. We've included the minimal necessary contents that we believe should be in the CF Code. If the CF Code is adopted and practically established by the IMO in the future, documents in the CF Code have to be added or revised. The CF Board is responsible for future amendments of the CF Code. This board will be divided into two categories as seen in this slide.
So, in conclusion, till now, to reduce greenhouse gases in the shipping industry, IMO has successfully implemented technical measures like EEDI and EEXI, and operational measures like EEOI, CII, and SEAMF. IMO is not limited to the several measures mentioned in the initial strategy, but it is rather open to consider and adopt new ideas. However, in the initial strategy, there have been no further discussions on economic candidate measures like MBM since 2013 till present. Therefore, we, Mare Nostrum, propose to the IMO to adopt the CF measures that the UN has already implemented to accurately measure carbon emissions for the MBM and therefore ultimately reduce the total greenhouse gas emission from ships. We propose the CF code as a legislative measure of the MBM. Thank you so much for listening to our proposal.
Thank you. The sound of opening cork made me wake up. Well done. So yeah, Q&A session. If you have any questions, please raise your hand. From Peace of Mind. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. First, we have several questions regarding the great presentations that you
One
made.
question, please. Yeah.
One question. Okay.
So when you ask a question, let's ask one question, and we listen to the from the team, and then we go to the next. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. First, we believe that a tax levy is lessening the amount of tax that is given to companies in order to provide better facilitation of their engagement in the code. But however, the team has proposed that they would provide a uniform tax rate to all ships. So if the delegate is correct, is there a reason why the team has named this policy as a tax levy?
Thank you for your thoughtful question. Do you mind if you take 20 seconds to discuss with our team?
Yes, thank you.
So, of course, now I will answer for your question. We believe that according to the IMO's NMFD principle, all member states should have the same rights. So that's why we decided to put it as all uniform tax rate. But the thing is here, we have considered CF levy with both NMFD principle and CBDR principle, right? So the CBDR principle is like an obligation. It's giving all member states the same obligation, but different responsibilities because of their economical reasons or how much they put an effort in the climate changes. That's why even though we put a uniform tax rate, it should be different by ship types. And from that, we believe that the CF levy will collect the amount of financial funds to support the least developing countries and small island developing states.
Thank you. Is a follow-up allowed?
I'd like to add on to that. I'd like to add on to his answer. UNFCCC's CBDR principle denies equal responsibilities of all states with regard to environmental protection. And the NMFT principle allows a principle of non-discrimination and equal treatment to all ships, irrespective of their flags. So it is seen that most of the emissions are from the developed states. So what we're going to do is we're going to use both principles so that both developing and developed states can follow the CF code. Thank you.
Okay, I will move on to the next question, maybe from George. And yeah.
Yes, congratulations to your great presentation. But I have one concern about your definition of the carbon footprint code, CF code. You defined this CF code as the total amount of carbon released from the beginning of the production. This means a shipbuilding process, start with the shipbuilding process. That means it will directly affect the shipbuilding industry in the first place. So as you know, Korea is the world #1 shipbuilding country. So for the sake of national interest of Republic of Korea, I wonder if you ever considered the level of preparedness of Korean shipbuilding industry for this CF code. My very question is that, what do you think of the competitiveness of Korean shipbuilding industry in terms of your CF code compared to other shipbuilding countries like China, Japan, or European shipbuilding countries?
Thank you for your thoughtful question, Judge. We believe, as you have mentioned, Korea is one of the biggest production of the shipbuilding. So that's why shipbuilding. Sorry for the interruption. So that's why we believe that in the shipbuilding phase, as a research that we found based on 2018 research from the Greek University, there's 11% carbon emission is produced in a total cycle of shipbuilding to scrap in the shipbuilding phase. So to answer your question, we believe that if the construction companies collect the information from the company itself, there will be enough data to be the groundwork of the measurement MBM. Thank you very much.
In addition to his answer, Korea already has a greenhouse gas inventory that's already being used and reported to the UNFCCC. So we believe that Korea is quite well prepared to implement the CF code. Thank you.
Okay, it was a nice presentation, and my question is very similar to Dr. Nam. As you mentioned in your presentation, it is really unprecedented proposal. I'm telling you this because the IMO is International Maritime Organization, and they developed rules, but its rules and regulation apply to ship when it is put into service. And you mentioned that you will include the control of this code from the shipbuilding. So again, it is unprecedented. So how will you, and can you convince IMO to widen their scope of work?
So according to the IMO's initial strategy, it's mentioned that the list of candidate measures is non-exhaustive and is without prejudice to measure, and the organization may further adopt and consider. So this kind of motivated us to propose the carbon footprint code to secure legal effectiveness. And for now, there's only a concept of carbon footprint that is defined in the UN. And the UN has already adopted the concept of carbon footprint, but the IMO is a UN's maritime specialized agency, right? It's a delegation that deals with the matters related to the shipping sector. But in order to regulate the greenhouse gases, we believe that IMO needs to adopt the CF code to further develop it as a CF code, and so that it can suit the maritime industry, because it's a maritime specialized agency. So the code will obviously gain a legislative effectiveness when it's discussed between member states and agreed to make it obligatory. Did that answer your question, sir? Okay, thank you.
Last question from Lighthouse in 10 seconds. Yeah.
Thank you for your concrete and specific proposal, but I have a question on the realistic possibility, since the implementation of this new code is quite a lot of work. So I want to hear your opinion about the specific progress or specific method to implement this new code. Thank you.
How they can implement practically and realistically, because we believe it would be very difficult to adopt the code.
Okay. So as you saw in our slide, we actually mentioned the CF board. which will be like kind of working as a technical committee that will be collecting all of this, the CF levy. So we feel like that would be the work of the CF board. Everything would be done by the CF board. Did that perhaps answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Oh, and further add to your question, in the IMO's environmental regulation, there are technical and operation measures, and they both have pre-designated minimal ton of ship that is already standardized. Like, you know, EEDI and EXI, they have 400 tons as a standards. Thus, our market-based measure should not be different from the tons of other measures. So that will be used as the standardized. Thank you.
Yep, thank you very much. So, yeah, well done, Team Mare Nostrum. Please return to your seat. Thank you.